Thank you. Kim McCrail from the Wall Street Journal. For Secretary Raimondo, I'm hoping to ask you specifically about semiconductor-related export controls. What more would you like to see from partners in Europe, from the European Union, individual European countries, when it comes to export controls related to semiconductors? Are you asking for anything in addition to what's been discussed so far? And can you speak to what led to the concern? What sorts of concerns led you to turn your focus to legacy chips in particular, as opposed to the focus on cutting-edge chips? And for Secretary Blinken, NATO foreign ministers talked this week about a proposal for a 5-year fund totaling about $100 billion to support Ukraine's military. What do you think of that plan? And in particular, what do you think about the idea of committing money over an extended period of time toward this? Thank you.
So on semiconductors, as we all know, semiconductors underpin our entire economy, and that will be increasingly the case as we move into an age of artificial intelligence. All artificial intelligence is built upon the foundation of semiconductors, advanced chips, but chips. So the watchword that we have when it comes to semiconductor export controls is vigilance. And what I'm looking for, and which is what we have with our European partners, is constant dialogue and vigilance. The Chinese wake up every day trying to figure out how to do an end run around our export controls so that they, and potentially their military, can access our most sophisticated technology, including chips, which means we have to wake up every day just as motivated to protect the citizens of our country. And we do that in collaboration with our partners, in this case, the Europeans. So I'm pleased with where we are, but it is, there's no end game. It is a constant work. And every time we see any sort of diversion, we need our allies to work with us to crack down on the diversion, to enforce, to share information, and to be more thoughtful about our approach. With respect to legacy chips, we know, China is extremely focused on these more mature chips. I should say, legacy is probably not great branding. I'm not sure that I would want to be known as a mature and a legacy. The truth of it is, these are, they're feature rich. They're like the workhorse semiconductor chips. They're in cars, this microphone, all of your household appliances, medical devices, every pacemaker, everything. That's the quote-unquote legacy chip. We know that based on China's own reporting, about 60% of all new quote-unquote legacy chips coming to the market in the next handful of years will be produced by China. And we know there's a massive subsidization of that industry on behalf of the Chinese government, which could lead to huge market distortion. And so that's why we're focused on it. And in this regard, too, this is another example, to your colleague's question, of TTT success. We in the United States at the Commerce Department launched a Defense Production Act survey. It's compulsory. We're trying to collect data in the market to find evidence of any kind of market distortion. And the Europeans have also launched their own version of a similar survey, and we plan to share that data. We talked about that this morning, and act together. So, and Tony said it beautifully, we have half of the world's GDP between the U.S. and the EU. When we act together against any kind of market distortion, whether it's from China or anyone else, legacy chips or anything else, we're that much more effective. So that's why we're focused on it.
And with regard to Ukraine, I think there are two things to focus on here. First is the urgent. And the urgent is making sure that Ukraine gets what it needs now to deal with the ongoing Russian aggression. And there we had a lot of focus during the NATO meetings over the last couple of days on the efforts that we're all engaged in to make sure that that happens, that they have the munitions, that they have the artillery, that they have the air defense systems they need, as well as the funding that goes with that. For the United States, that means the urgent necessity of passing the President's supplementary budget request. This is the most urgent thing that we can do. And it bears repeating. It's profoundly in the U.S. national interest to do it, because even as there's an aggression against Ukraine and against its people, there's also an aggression against the basic principles that underlie the international system and that help promote peace and stability around the world. Principles like you can't simply go in and redraw the borders of your neighboring country by force or take it over or try to dictate its future, because if we let that go unchecked, then it's going to be open season for would-be aggressors anywhere around the world, and that's going to be bad for the United States. But second, the money that is in the supplemental budget request, virtually all of it, when it comes to support for Ukraine's military, is going to be spent in the United States, which will build up our own defense industrial base, provide more good jobs for our workers. Europeans have made similar investments. And again, I want to underscore something we've said from the outset. When it comes to burden sharing, something that has long been discussed and debated in various challenges around the world, when it comes to Ukraine, this is probably the best example of burden sharing that we've seen. For everything the United States has done, and it's been significant, our partners in Europe and beyond have done even more in terms of military support, economic support, humanitarian assistance, caring for refugees, you name it. So that's one piece. The second piece, though, is the longer term. And here, the question is, how can we make sure that Ukraine is able to develop, over the coming years, a military that can be an effective deterrent against future aggression and can defend Ukraine if that aggression comes nonetheless? And as well, how can we make sure that Ukraine stands strong economically with more private sector investment going in, and democratically as it moves towards the EU and undertakes the necessary reforms? For the military piece, we have 30 countries now that are negotiating or have already negotiated bilateral agreements with Ukraine to help them build this future force. Some of those will come with some funding. Similarly, we're looking at NATO, and this is what we'll be doing at the NATO summit in July in Washington, at NATO's role in helping Ukraine build this future force, which also will be critical for its eventual membership in NATO. Now, how all of this is funded, through which mechanisms, and by whom, all of that is being very actively discussed, and we'll continue those discussions as we head into the NATO summit. But the bottom line is, yes, it's good to have a sustained source of funding, and when divided among so many countries, over time, it's significantly less than the monies that we've had to put in on an emergency basis these past 2 years. And it will get Ukraine to a point in the coming years where it will stand strongly on its own 2 feet, militarily, economically, democratically. That's the goal. That's the best possible answer to Putin's aggression.
Thank you very much indeed. This concludes our press conference. Thank you very much for coming.